Hello. How are we doing today? The other day I mentioned to you, I don't know, it's probably my last video. I mentioned a man named Dr. Jordan Peterson. And I may have told you that I just kind of met the man not too long ago. A friend of mine was watching some of my videos and he sent me a message and said, "You sound like you've been listening to Jordan Peterson." And I never heard of Jordan Peterson. But he piqued my interest, and so I went and found Jordan Peterson online. And I started watching the videos that he makes. And you gotta want to watch them because most of them are long. He is incredibly knowledgeable. When he tells you something simple, makes a simple one-sentence statement, he can talk about that for 45 minutes and cite 20 other experts and recite information from journals and reports and studies and books that other experts and famous now dead philosophers and psychologists and philosophers from the 1800s. He has all kinds of information in his head about things like that. About most things, really. So when he starts talking about something and then presenting that background information to you that he's got, it takes a while. Not only does it take a while, but it goes sailing by me sometimes. It's up here over my head, above my ability to understand instantly. But it's interesting, and the conclusions he comes to are so along the vein of my way of thinking about things that I really enjoy reading the guy. I started reading his book. I ordered 2 books at once, and the other one was a different, shorter, easier to read, more amusing, more fun book. So I read it first because I knew this Dr. Peterson's book would be difficult. But what Dr. Peterson has done is he has taken these 12 rules that he's developed for life, and I think he said maybe to start with there were 50 or more rules, and as he began to think about making it a book and he started working on it and making an outline and getting things written, he condensed it down to a smaller number and a smaller number, and he finally arrived at 12. So his philosophies are written in a book called The 12 Rules for Life. And what I think I'm going to try to do, and I don't know whether I can or not, but today's going to be chapter 1. I'm going to give you the Redneck rendition of Dr. Peterson's book, chapter by chapter, beginning today with chapter 1. And the first rule is, stand up straight with your shoulders back. That's rule number 1. And he expounds on that with all kinds of information and science and data about why one should stand up straight with their shoulders back. And it was all interesting, and it was all made sense in the way that he put it together, but it was difficult. I would read a while and it'd make me sleepy reading it, and sometimes I'd have to go back and read paragraphs over again because I wasn't sure what he was saying or what he meant. But when I got the whole chapter read, and I got the gist of the whole thing, and I understood then why stand up straight with your shoulders back was a rule for a successful life. When I understood that, and I got what he was trying to say, all that information that he had that added to it helped me, because I realized that without his book, Stand Up Straight with Your Shoulders Back, was something that I had learned in life. Not only had I learned it, I'd been taught it on purpose. And what I learned from it and applied to my own life had been successful for me. And so I thought, I'm understanding this. If I had to talk about it, I wouldn't talk about it like he does. I couldn't to start with, because I didn't know all the things about lobsters and chimpanzees and things that he knew about studies that had caused him to come to this conclusion. All I knew was when I was a boy, my mother told me 150 million times, quit slumping around, stand up straight, get your shoulders back, get your chin up. And I think she told me that because she believed that good posture went right along with other habits that caused good health. She may have reasons beyond that, but that's what I always assumed from the context of when I got that message and the rest of the things that she said around it, that was her purpose in telling me that. As a very young person, reinforced over and over again for the rest of my life. And then I began to think about some of my father's rules. And he had rules. He had unique rules sometimes, apart from just the ordinary disciplinary rules that all children get from their parents. My dad had what I'm going to call a code of manhood set of rules. And they could be summed up in stand up straight with your shoulders back and your chest out and your chin up. My father could have said that. That's not exactly how he said it, but that is how he said it. That's what his rules said. His rules said that these are the things that you need to do to become a man. Son. Now, I was his oldest son. It was important to me that I understood these concepts that he had about manhood. And I could speculate a lot of different things about my father, the relationship between him and his father, how he arrived at his thinking. And I might do that sometime, but not this time. This time I'm just gonna tell you about I'm not even gonna explain to you what his rules were, but I'm gonna tell you what kind of a man they made me. And that's really what he was after. He was after me becoming a certain type of man that he believed was a man. And I realized in reading Jordan Peterson's chapter 1 that I had become that man that my father wanted me to become. And I had spent my life standing up straight with my shoulders back and my chin up. And that is the way I approached life. And that is the way I approached confrontations in life. And because of that, I sometimes caused myself problems, confrontational ones with others, because of that attitude. And I think I've talked to you about this in other videos. I had a tone of voice that I didn't realize that I had, And that, coupled with my posture, my posturing because of my father's rules, got me in a lot of trouble. But it also prevented a lot of trouble because, and I learned this from uh, Dr. Peterson, because my assuming the position that I did sometimes said to others, don't mess with this guy. Don't get in a confrontational situation with him, because there he stands, chin up, shoulders back, and he's formidable. I wasn't trying to say that, but that does say that sometimes. And I realized that not only in thinking about myself as a young man and a teenager and then a young man and then a middle-aged man, I'm still like that. Still like that. 74 years old, and I walk around with my head up, my chin's up, my shoulders are back. I'm confident with who I am in this world. I'm confident with what I've accomplished in this world. I'm confident with the content of my character. My attitude about myself is not, I don't think, conceited or arrogant. I'm just satisfied with the man I've become. And Dr. Peterson's chapter 1, Dr. Peterson's first rule, and the same thing from my parents, had to do with how I got there. And I was also very fortunate. You know, life is difficult and complicated, and there's just all kinds of things that we could point to and think about and look at. But as I look back on my life, for instance, as a young person, when I was in, say, preschool or grade school age person, trying to learn to become this man that my dad wanted me to, and I played athletics and went to school and went to the local boys club and went to the local Little League park, and I did all those things, and I was very fortunate. The grade school I went to had good athletic teams, and while I participated on those teams, we had a winning record. We seldom lost. I think 5th grade, 6th grade, football, basketball, all the games combined in those 2 years, I lost one game. We lost one game in that period of time at my grade school. It wasn't me. I was on a team. Happened to be fortunate enough to be on a team that was very good, and we won very frequently. At the boys club, in the smaller, what they called the little bitty leagues, I happened to be on a team called the Rascals. There was 2 divisions in that little league, the A division and the B division, and the Rascals were the champions of the A division, and the Bubblegummers were the champions of the B division, and both of us went undefeated. And so I lost one game in that period of time. We played a championship game with them, and they beat us 1 or 2 points. But all the other games I won. I happened to be part of a team that won. And the same thing happened in what they called Big Bitty, the next 2 years of the league. I was on a team that won the championship. Didn't lose a game to anybody at any time. And I played with the All-Stars for those that age group. And we won every game we ever played until the final game of the Indiana State Championship. And we lost that game, very close game, and we lost by 1 point or 3 points, I'm not sure. to a team from Gary, Indiana, and that team went to Bridgeport, Connecticut. And that team won the national championship. So they just barely beat us and then won the national championship. So I happened to be fortunate enough to be on a very good team. And when I went to junior high school, it was the same way. We had a junior high school coach in football and basketball. He never lost anything to anybody. We were the biggest school in the county, and that's who we played. The other smaller schools, most of our games. But we went out to the neighboring counties too. That guy never lost a game for years and years. Some of the kids on our team had their driver's license when they were in the 7th grade. But give us an unfair advantage. It showed up later when we got in high school, and those kids weren't eligible anymore. They were too old to play. But our coach in those years, and winning was important to him, and he took the biggest, oldest, meanest, baddest kids that was available to him, and he put them on the team, and we won. And I was the benefactor of that. So I spent my early existence on earth being a winner. And not because I was really all that good, I was decent, but because I was fortunate enough to get on the team that won. I don't think very often I was the best player on the team. Maybe never. But I was on a team that was very good and we won. I didn't have to lose. I wasn't any good at all at baseball, but even the baseball teams that are on were pretty good teams. We had good pitchers, and in Little League and in Babe Ruth League, I could claim no credit for any of that because my baseball skills were very insufficient. But I was on good teams, and we won lots of games. That's what is that? That was just good fortune on my part, and it helped, though, keep me walking around with my head up. I didn't have to be defeated and have the things that go along with defeat affect me. I didn't even intend to go there. I don't know how I got to that, but I guess Dr. Peterson's the things that he wrote about what winning does for you and what losing does for you just brought that to my mind. Stop. I've gone sideways here, and I began talking about myself and my relationship with my father to the point where I've turned this discussion of Jordan Peterson's Rule 1 into something that sounds like it's for men and men only, and it absolutely is not. So I am the father of 3 children, all of whom are women. They were my daughters, my little girls. And I want them to get this message too, and this message is for them. And Dr. Peterson did a magnificent job of explaining this whole phenomena without excluding women, although he does denote that there is a difference in the way hierarchies are formed and perceived depending on which gender you are. And he does, using scientific study and thousands, millions of years of evolutional evidence, he does a magnificent job of it. And I'm not equipped to do that like he did it. So I got sidetracked, and I apologize for that, because I want my children, my grandchildren, including those who are young ladies, and my great-grandchildren, including again the little girls, to understand that standing upright with your shoulders back has to do with you as well. Your ideas and your desires are every bit as important as anyone else's, male or female. This needed to be said for the sake of the young ladies that are in my family, and I want them to hear what I thought and what I believe, and I want them to get the benefit of this as well as the young men. And I don't want them to feel excluded, even though because of my experiences and my journey as I made this video through my history and my experiences seem to exclude them. I didn't want that. I don't want it. I did have one problem with the rules that my father made, and I'm going to talk about them just for a minute. And I don't know how they even apply to this. I hadn't thought about this either while I was reading Dr. Peterson's information, and so I don't know how I overcame this. But my father believed that men don't cry. He was very hard. He'd had a hard and difficult life. His mother died when he was young, and he was raised by an older sister or a team of older sisters. And joined the service as a teenager. Fought in World War II. And he was a hard man, and his entire life I saw him cry one time when my sister died, 34 years old. And he didn't think men should cry. And he didn't think his youngest or his oldest son should cry at some of the things he cried at. And sometimes he punished me for crying. And from that I developed a hard shell myself. I could take a horrific beating and not cry. I could be grievously wounded or injured and not cry. I could absorb excruciating pain and not cry. But when my puppy followed me to this grocery store and on the way home got run over in the middle of 16th Street, I cried. When things moved me emotionally, I cried. I still do. I got real hard about it in a lot of ways, but when things move me emotionally, I cry. My dad finally come to understand that after I was about, 40, 50 years old. But he had a lot of trouble with it when I was a boy. Things like Little House on the Prairie episodes. The movie Old Yeller. Other movies that are maybe not sad, but they're moving. One of my favorite movies, and Dr. Peterson likes, he reads fictional works too. He likes those. He explains the message in some. For instance, I'm not going to get into that. It's not what I'm talking about right now, but he sees the writer's intent in the storyline, and he sees that in all kinds of things and uses it to illustrate his points. But to illustrate my point, I'm going to talk about a book which I never heard him say that he's read. Although I have read a lot of the books that he's read as well. To Kill a Mockingbird. And I've read that book. more than once. And I've seen the old black and white movie with Gregory Peck as Atticus Finch. I can't remember the children's, what those actors' names were, but it's a great movie. If you haven't ever seen it, I recommend it to you. To Kill a Mockingbird. Written from, I think a lady wrote that book. Can't remember her name, but I think it's the only book she ever wrote. It wasn't amounted to anything, but it's a classic. And at the end of that, his children are up in the balcony of the courtroom, and their dad's leaving after this trial. The book's about a trial, most of it. And the whole multitude of people in the upper level of the court, they're all black people, by the way. This book's about racial conflict in the South in the early to middle part of the last century. And the old black gentleman looks down at the children. He said, "Stand up, children." Your father's passing. See that? Can't even think about it. That moved me. The respect that they had for this man and what he'd done. I consider a later movie, many years later, there's a movie called A Few Good Men. It's also a courtroom drama, and it's about someone making an unpopular defense of someone in the Marine Corps. And it's the same scene at the end of that movie when this young corporal that's been one of the defendants in the case says, "Attention, there's an officer on deck," as Tom Cruise leaves the courtroom. It's the same thing. It moves me too. Things like that. Moved by them, causes me to cry. Wow, this video got completely out of hand. I didn't intend to talk about any of this, but there it is. But it still has to do with this thing I have about being a man and what it takes to be a man and what a man looks like and what a man acts like. And I learned that from my father. And I didn't learn to stand up straight and hold your shoulders back from him. The stand up straight and hold your shoulders back is a result of what I learned. It's how I am. That's my attitude with life. I can stand up straight with my chin up, my shoulders back, and be proud of who I am and what I am. There's other, start to say modern, but they're kind of semi-modern because I'm old. To me, they happened yesterday, but to some of you, you may not even heard of them yet. One of them was required watching for my grandsons. It's a TV series called Lonesome Dove. It's about two old Texas Rangers who go on a cattle drive. There's lots and lots of sub-stories. It's a 6-hour long miniseries. It takes 6 hours to watch it. Robert Duvall's one of these men. Tommy Lee Jones is the other, and they're really close friends. And about 3/4 the way through the movie, Robert Duvall is mortally injured, and he has to have one of his legs amputated. And he's in a doctor's, I don't know, he's in a hotel room or a doctor's office. He's somewhere. Has an old drunken doctor attending to him. The doctors want to take his other leg off because he's got gangrene in it, and if he doesn't take it off, he's going to die. It's just that simple. We got to take that leg off or you're going to die. He won't let him have the leg. And his friend comes and finds him. Tommy Lee Jones. His name's Woodrow F. Call in the movie. He comes and he's sitting at his bedside and they're discussing things, and Woodrow doesn't want to lose his friend. He's trying to convince him to let the doctor cut his leg off. And Augustus, that's his Robert Duvall's name in the movies, Augustus McCrae. They call him Gus for short. Gus, he says, no. He said he can't do that. He can't have my leg. If I didn't have that leg, I couldn't stand up. Essentially is what he's saying. With that leg and a crutch, I can stand up and get around, and I can still stand up. He said, I've spent my whole life. And this is essentially what he said. I've spent my whole life walking around with my shoulders back and my chin up. And that's the way I'm going to be at the end of my life. I'm not going to be scooting around on my ass. And that was an attitude about being a man. One other movie that I can think of that depicts this same thing that I'm talking about is called Walking Tall. And most of you are thinking, Walking Tall, I've seen that. What's he talking about? The Rock. No, I'm not talking about The Rock. I'm talking about the previous movie about Buford Pusser. He's a sheriff in the South named Buford Pusser. And J. Don Baker, I think, played that part. Walking Tall. That's another movie about standing up straight with your shoulders back, being a certain kind of a man, and being that kind of a man in spite of what happened. And I'm sure Jordan Peterson said it better than I did. The problem with the way Jordan Peterson said it, there's a whole bunch of people that are my friends and acquaintances that I'm not going to say they're not smart enough to read Jordan Peterson, but they're not patient enough or want the message enough or diligent enough to read his book and grasp what he's saying. So I'm trying to tell you from my perspective. I'm a translator from a renowned world psychologist with an education that so far exceeds mine and most of the people that I know. Knowledge and background to something that a redneck that thinks like I do and has lived the life that I do can understand, because it's a good message. Stand up straight. Hold your shoulders back. I'm a hard times guy. Have a good day.